Hello summoners and welcome back to another ProGuides video. In accordance to popular request, we are here to provide you guys the top 10 low elo mistakes that we see. Our analysts have gone over some games in lower elo, from Iron all the way up to Platinum 4, and compiled some of their observations. If you find that you're stuck and you can't seem to rank up, look no further, as our analysts have brought up a lot of points, and it's likely one or even several of them might be relevant to you. The preseason is the perfect time for you guys to recognize your flaws and begin to work on them, so don't feel called out if any of these apply to you. We're all there with you, or were there with you at one point. It's all a part of the process. For our question of the day, what is the best advice you've ever received in regards to improving in League? For me, it's when my friend told me to look over my 1v1s and think about every possible thing I could have done differently. Once I started to be more self-critical, I improved significantly. Are you getting ganked in your own lane? Constantly demolished? Well, don't worry, we've got you covered, because ProGuides is the #1 proven way to quickly level up your League of Legends skills, and the best part is we have a Cyber Monday subscription sale going on right now for 33% off, and it ends at 11:59 p.m. PST. Whether you're looking for tier lists, champion guides, coaching, or courses from your favorite pro players, ProGuides is where you'll find them. Even players like Nightblue, Bunny Fufu, and Loco Doco support ProGuides. So what are you waiting for? Click the link and start improving right now. Let's get started with the video. The first thing that our analysts noted was that a lot of players don't understand when they need to recall. I mean, most players understand that when they have a lot of money, they need to go home and spend it. Easy enough. Many others also understand that it's a good time to recall after pushing a wave. So in other words, they understand good recall timers when they're in an advantage. For those of you that don't, just note that before you recall, you should do your best to shove the minion wave into the enemy turret beforehand. This is because it will maximize the amount of gold that you gain and also make sure that you lose less minions in the long run. What we see more often though is that players don't know how to recall in any other scenario. When they're too low or in unfavorable situations, a lot of the players we looked at just continue to bleed out instead of recalling. In situations where you've simply been put to something that you can't do anything, or because you're too low, or because you're going to get dove, you need to back off and you need to recall. I've honestly seen too many top and bot laners stick around when they are obviously going to be dove, but because they're sitting under tower with 200 HP, they think they'll be fine. You're not. You need to cut your losses and opt for damage control in those circumstances. Recall and come back to lane so you can retake control. Up next is one that you've probably heard a lot, which is buying control wards. Seriously guys, a lot of players, especially in silver and bronze and iron, just don't want to buy one. You don't even have to buy one for your team, buy one for yourself. A lot of the time, if you're going to play aggressively in getting favorable trades, your opponent won't even clear the ward that you place. Instead, it'll finally get cleared out when the enemy jungler ganks you, and it's so much better to know that you lost 75 gold on that ward than knowing that you died to a gank, which gave 300 gold to the enemy jungler and also lost you a bunch of minions. When you're walking back into lane with 100 gold, ask yourself, why? You could have spent that gold on a control ward, and instead of letting that gold sit there unused, you could have easily done something that was worth it. After all, that 100 gold won't matter unless you take your next reset anyway. You guys probably see this all the time, and our analysts could not ignore the fact that they saw this all the time, which is players abruptly stop playing the game just to type. Presumably, they're also blaming their teammates at the same time, which is just a double whammy of bad. I've seen way too many players start typing, get ganked or engaged on, and then die. Seriously, there's a time and a place for this stuff, and one of the most tilting things is dying while typing. The only thing that's more tilting is watching someone else die while typing, so honestly, it's something that we all have to stop doing. It's silly, ridiculous, and not helpful at all. If you have something helpful to type, you can do so in a good spot where you won't die, or if you're already dead, do it in the gray screen. Recently, another thing that I learned about low elo players is that they're way too focused on their own screen to look anywhere else. Now again, there's an appropriate time to do this. You don't want to be looking bot lane when you're top lane and trading in an intense 1v1, but after you clear the wave and you're just sitting under your turret, maybe even waiting for minions, it does not hurt you to take a peek at other lanes. Admittedly, this is only going off of 2 coaching sessions, but it's something one of our analysts noticed 2 of his lower elo students had in common. They literally never looked at any other lanes. But that's where you need to be looking if you can't find leads in your own lane. These are potential gank opportunities, dives, or necessary information you're missing out on when you don't look outside of your own lane. Especially if you play champions who snowball really hard like mid lane assassins, you have to do this. Typically, junglers are doing a better job of this already since it's kind of part of the role, but for laners and low elo, this is something that you need to fix. I want you to think about one gameplay example that happens a lot. Imagine your flash is ready and you're trying to kill somebody on the enemy team, and then you flash in and try to use your abilities, and then they flash away and survive, and it was a waste of your flash. You could say to yourself, I didn't know he had flash, or I didn't know they would do that. But imagine, since your teammates didn't ping, and you didn't know that their flash was presumably on or off cooldown, you didn't have the information, the only thing you could do was guess. Now imagine, while you were walking back to lane, if you just so happened to look at their lane and see them blow their flash. The simple act of paying more attention and literally watching the game more would make you know and remember that either A, that person used their flash, or you know that they have their flash. One thing that players still don't do enough is use their trinkets early on in the game. Early game information and spotting out the enemy jungler during their first clear is paramount to jungle tracking and understanding how you should play your own lane. Whether you're jungle or support, you have opportunities to look for a deep ward before minions spawn. I promise you, most players are just literally sitting under their turret waiting for the minions to come for the first wave. The times where they're actually watching entrances, you can push forward aggressively with a teammate and try to get some vision on raptors, red or blue buff, so you can see where the enemy jungler starts. From there, you can determine whether or not you have the liberty to play aggressively or need to play passively, since the enemy jungler will path to your lane. I know that a lot of you have probably been watching your favorite streamers or pro players and want to play like them, and that's great, but a lot of you guys don't do it right. There is a proper way to roam, and it all starts with your minion wave. If you are constantly roaming, picking up random kills, your results will be fairly inconsistent. Sometimes you'll pick up free kills and take over the game. Easy. Other times you'll fail, fall behind, and become irrelevant to the game. The key here is to make sure you lose less when you roam, and that all starts with properly playing with your wave. Whenever you're in a position to roam, it should either mean that you are in complete control of the wave, or you are willing to sacrifice your wave for the opportunity. As soon as you start that roam, you need to know what you're risking here. If you're stronger than your opponent and can dictate the wave, you have literally no reason not to slow push the wave, zone off your opponent, and lose virtually nothing. When you crash a bigger wave into the enemy turret, that means they're stuck in their lane longer, and it also means they'll need to spend more time clearing the big wave. In other words, you get more time to roam unpunished and losing nothing. This is why priority is so important. You hear this term all the time. That's literally what it means. Lane priority, lane prio. They say it all the time. It's an overused term, and honestly, it starts to mean less and less by day. But really what it means is that you're roaming with the intent of sacrificing some farm. So if you don't have lane priority and you are sacrificing, you should be 110% certain that you will get more than you lose out of it. Otherwise, it just doesn't logically make any sense to do that play. The person with lane priority, the person with prio, is the one who gets to make the roam first. And it all stems from the fact that they don't lose anything because they've pushed in the wave. The final thing to note is that once you start a roam, you don't have to commit to it. If the enemy starts backing off and the roam suddenly becomes a low percentage play, just turn around, go back to your lane. Honestly, the only bad play you can make is constantly turning around, wasting your time, and you can't decide what to commit to. Applying pressure alone is productive, so don't even feel bad if you can't pick up a kill. Just missing from the map might make somebody miss a cannon minion, so think about that. On the same topic of slow pushing, there's something else that a lot of players aren't doing nearly enough. And this was especially prevalent in silver and below, where players weren't zoning at all. Almost all of us understand trading to some extent. When you're stronger or will deal more damage than your opponent, trading is a good idea because you will deal more damage than you will take back. Simple. But when your opponent is also aware that you are stronger than them, the proper reaction by them should be to avoid trading with you. Now, a lot of you guys might be playing and thinking, well, my opponent is playing super safe and there's nothing that I can do about it. That's true. You cannot stop your opponent from playing safe. You cannot take over their keyboard, but not completely, because you could still get more out of it. Zoning refers to a player moving forward aggressively with the intent of trading, forcing their opponent to back off. You want to use these power advantages to push your enemies off of the minion wave regardless of the state of your wave. When it's pushing towards you, this will cause them to not only miss farm, but also experience. And then with experience advantages, you have opportunities to all in at level 6 when you hit that huge power spike before your opponent. When the wave is pushing towards your opponent, zoning is essential. You can sometimes force your opponent to miss experience or even force them to fight when they don't want to. Overall, you want to apply as much pressure as you possibly can and put people in uncomfortable situations. Another thing that goes hand in hand is not using your power advantages effectively. Two of the most common power spikes for champions are at level 2 and level 6. In spite of this, we saw a lot of players hitting level 2 who weren't prepared to all-in their opponent. This is another scenario where zoning comes into play. If your opponent knows that you're going to hit level 2 or level 6 first, they must back off, because you are going to be able to get off a nasty trade. When they don't respect this, you should be able to win nearly any lane matchup off of a great trade alone. And in cases where they do respect it, you want to get the most out of it. Really milk it. Hitting level 2 first can potentially allow you to force your opponent to back off and miss a minion. This single minion could even be the difference between life or death later, because when you hit your next power spike at level 6, your opponent will still be 1 minion behind you, and it's honestly quite common for them to even forget that they missed a minion a few minutes ago. Some champions do have varying power spikes though, like Syndra at level 9, Kassadin's level 16, Veigar's level 13, and many others at level 3. Regardless of when the power spikes are though, playing against them and playing as the champion, you need to learn how they work and capitalize on them. Something specific and brand new for this season is the alcoves in the side lanes, but it's blowing my mind how people are using them improperly. Pretty often players are just walking into them because they're there. Sure, okay, the novelty of it and the fact that it's new is definitely making it appealing. However, if you want to win your games, you need to learn how to use them correctly. To keep it short and simple, you want to use alcoves for one of 3 reasons. Number 1, to waste an enemy's ward. If they see you there, they might ward it. Hey, you win something. Number 2, you're kiting and just need to buy time. Maybe you're waiting for cooldowns. Number 3, you benefit from the closed space. If you're running away from your opponent, running into an alcove is suboptimal. A lot of the time players are just running into the alcove hoping it'll save them, but you have more ground to cover, so this inevitably puts you in a situation where it's hurting you instead. Trinket wards are limited, so if you're going to fog your opponents over and over, mixing it up with the alcove and using the brushes as well can be a viable option. Once they waste their ward, they'll have an opportunity to face check a brush and possibly lose an auto attack. Conversely, if your opponents ward a brush, they won't have one for the alcove. Those little microseconds, those times where you can't kill somebody because you lost vision for half a second, that's where they come into play. When you're kiting and need to buy time, it's self-explanatory with our last point. The fog of war makes it very difficult for your opponents to deal consistent damage to you, so you can definitely use it if you have some teammates on the way, or if some vital cooldowns are almost back up for you. Of course, the final reason is that your champion benefits from it. While it doesn't happen too often, baiting an enemy to flash over or chase into the alcoves can be a death sentence against champions like Poppy, Vayne, or Rumble. In specific scenarios, this closed terrain can give some champions the edge that they needed to win their duels. The final issue that we noticed is a very simple fix. Players often are building the exact same items in the same order every game. You need to adapt. Yes, champions definitely have core items that they'll build in almost every single game, you're right. But there are scenarios where you need to build specific items. When you have that one guy spamming build armor or build hex drinker in your team's chat, they might be onto something. Consider the circumstances of who's fed on the enemy team, or which champions the enemy team has, if you're in a spree, or how much gold you have to spare. We've done the math, and honestly, defensive items are so much more cost effective, and Hex Drinker is one of the best items in regards to its gold value and bonus stat value. Sometimes though, you need to change up which offensive items you need. Maybe some extra lifesteal wouldn't hurt. Maybe building an item like Guardian Angel or Zanya's can win you an important team fight outright. Pay attention, don't autopilot. Penetration is also super important here. A lot of mage players undervalue, especially in lower elo, the value of Void Staff. You need to get these items if people have MR. There's only so much a death cap can do if they have 300 MR. Alright, that concludes this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Once again, make sure to check out ProGuides.com to take your game to the next level. We have so much content over there that I want you guys to check out, and also make sure you stay tuned to our YouTube channel. Until next time, good luck on the Summoner's Rift, and I'll see you all in Season 10.